You know, I'm not gonna lie. I actually do enjoy watching some gameplay footage. What? You expect me to actually play this game? I mean, does it look like I could hold up a controller with these things? Hey everybody, welcome back to the Muppet Vlog. And this time around, we got something completely different because we're not going to be looking into a new series or anything like that with the Muppets. This time around, we're going to go back to the past and look into something that the Muppets are not necessarily known for, but they have dabbled upon it a few times in the past. And what I'm talking about is a video game. And in this case, what I'll be looking into is Muppet RaceMania for the PlayStation, or the PlayStation 1, if you will. And one thing I will say right now, there is a part of me that is actually pretty excited to go and replay this because as a kid, I enjoyed playing this game. Maybe it's not necessarily my favorite PlayStation game that I've played very often as a kid, but I've definitely had a good time with this one. Now, keep in mind that this is not a spoiler to say that, oh, I'm going to be so nostalgic for this and I'm going to be showering this game with love and all that kind of stuff. I'll admit that it's been quite a long time since I have played Muppet RaceMania, so it's pretty much a guarantee that I will be playing this from a new and older perspective, and especially with the fact that I'll be playing this more as a critic, or I'm going to be looking at it more with a critical eye, if you will. Now, on the surface, it looks pretty straightforward in terms of what it is. It's basically one of those Mario Kart clones or those cartoony racing games, but this time it is themed to the Muppets. And in this case here, it's a little bit of that. It is a racing game in which you do play as the Muppets. And yes, just like with the Mario Kart games, you do collect items in order to go and stop your opponent from trying to win the race so that you can go and get ahead of them and stuff like that. And in this case here, not only can you go and play as a variety of Muppets, but also you get to go and race around tracks that are inspired by the 6 Muppet movies that were available at the time, considering that this game was released back in 2000. And I almost forgot to mention that this was actually created by Telltale Games. But in terms of the tracks, the movies that they have include The Muppet Movie, The Great Muppet Caper, Muppets Take Manhattan, The Muppet Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island, and Muppets from Space. So that's pretty much the quick summary to explain what Muppet RaceMania is all about. And since I have mentioned that this is one of those games that is categorized as a Mario Kart clone, a big part of it is because of when it came out. Because since it was released back in 2000, it was out during a time when one of the biggest trends in video games was to go and release a Mario Kart clone, since not just video game franchises, but many different franchises wanted to go and have their own Mario Kart. And to give you like a quick little history on that, back in the late 1990s, one of the biggest games of the Nintendo 64 was Mario Kart 64. It was one of those games that everybody who had that console needed to go and have because it was such a fun multiplayer game and a fun game on its own as well. So from there, many developers and many companies wanted to have a franchise that would have their own Mario Kart style game. And that's why back during the late 1990s and the early 2000s, at least before the era of the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 when they would come in, there was just so many of these cartoony racing games or these Mario Kart clones. And I'm not just talking about video game franchises that want to go and have their own kart game, such as Diddy Kong Racing or Crash Team Racing, but there are also many other franchises as well, especially like animated franchises. Like we're talking about like Mickey Mouse, Toy Story, Walt Disney World, Woody Woodpecker, and several others. And of course, we also have the Muppets, who decided to go and join in on the fun with having their own Mario Kart clone style game. So this pretty much came out in an era where that genre was very much common and it was pretty much everywhere. Now, this is not to go and say that if it's a Mario Kart clone, then it's inferior to Mario Kart, because there were a few that did stand out that turned out to be not just on par, but some people could debate that it turned out to be even better. Like one of the great examples being Crash Team Racing, which that one is another game that I did own as a kid, and I think I still do own it. And yeah, I think it is safe to say I might have played that one even more than Muppet RaceMania. And it's funny because maybe this is just my animation brain talking, but the whole Mario Kart fad during that era reminds me back of the 1990s when almost every animated film at the time needed to be a musical because they were trying to capitalize on the massive success that Disney had at the time with films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. So what Disney did during the 1990s, Mario Kart 64 did during that little era where we suddenly had this abundance of Mario Kart style games, including the Muppets, who decided to go and add in their piece to this entire collection. Now, I'll just go and say now, though, that even though on the surface, yes, there are a lot of similarities to Mario Kart with Muppet RaceMania, however, there are some noticeable differences as well. One thing I will give it credit now is that there is some effort put into it where it tries to be a bit more different than Mario Kart, just to go and actually say that if you do pick this one up, it's not going to be the same thing that you would go and get with Mario in the game. And a great example of that is in terms of the mechanics. Yes, it is a racing game, but at the same time, some of the big differences, including the items, which I will say now, there's not a variety like you would find in many of these types of games. There are only 4 types of items that you could go and get, and it doesn't matter in which place you're in, you'll always get either one of the 4, which includes a fish, which is like a straight shooter. You get a chicken that is more like a missile that would go and try to track the person ahead of you and try to take them down. There's also the penguin, which is like a bomb that you could place behind you, and a straightforward bomb, which it would go and bounce around and maybe hit an opponent. And then at the same time, while you're racing, there's also these fruits and vegetables that you could go and collect in order to go and fill up a beaker that is in the corner of your screen. And with this beaker, that allows you to go, depending on how much fruit you do have, you could go and press a button and it will go and activate a boost. Now, and that's also a major thing of how this does stand out from the other Mario Kart clones. You don't get an item that actually gives you a boost. You have to go and actually manually activate the boost whenever you can. So in a way, it is a little bit better in which you actually get to control the boost like whenever you want. It's not like based on luck on when you can go and get that mushroom type item in order to actually go fast. But at the same time, if you do fill up your beaker to the max and collect enough fruits and vegetables, then you can either go and get a mega boost, which speeds you like way forward, almost like halfway through the track in order to really get ahead from your opponents, or you can go and activate a special move. And depending on which character you play, they all each have a different special move in which it helps you out by screwing over your opponents. And depending on which character you select to go and race around, there are some that either like really slows them down. There are some that like drives them around in circles where they're completely out of control. control, or there are some that they have no choice but to momentarily stand still, or they were just transformed into like a completely different thing and they couldn't do anything about it. So there are these different mechanics, and from there, it does stand out a little bit from the other Mario Kart clones that when you do drive around with the Muppets, it is a little bit more different. And you could probably imagine that with these types of items and with the special moves and stuff like that, it does get pretty chaotic. And this is something that I will keep on saying throughout this review, mainly because it's probably the one trait that does make it stand out as not just its own racing game, but especially as a Muppet racing game, where there are times when it really can get chaotic and pretty unpredictable with how these items can go and fly around, or when is it that suddenly things are put into a halt because a special move occurred in which a character is going to go and zoom on by in order to go and try to take the lead in this case. And also, another thing that is different is the way they handle the tournaments. Now, of course, with these games, tournaments are very much commonplace, in which you would have to drive around several tracks, and depending on the position, you go and collect points. And in order to win the tournament, you have to have the most points. But in the case of Muppet RaceMania, it is a little bit different in how you go and collect the points. Yes, there are different points that are given depending on the position that you're in, whether it be in first place, second place, or third. But then at the same time, there are also points depending on whoever gets the best start, because before you go and start the race, you have to press a sequence of random buttons in order to go and get a massive boost. And whoever gets like the biggest boost of them all, they would go and get a bonus point. There is also a point given to whoever gets the fastest lap. And finally, there is also another point given to whoever gets the most hits. Like whoever gets an item and is able to go and continuously hit an opponent, they would go and give a point to them. Which is why it's honestly very interesting, because from my experience playing this game, it can absolutely be possible in which you could never be in first place in any of the races in the tournament, which, by the way, these tournaments are pretty big, in which you have to race around in 6 different tracks, each based on the different Muppet movies. But at the same time, though, even if you wouldn't get into first place in any of them, you could still collect a significant amount of points, especially with those bonuses. So you could just focus on trying to go and get the best start, or also get the most hits and stuff like that, and you could still end up winning the entire tournament. And it has happened to me in which never once did I ever get into first place, or maybe I only got into first place one time out of the 6 races in the tournament, and I still end up winning the whole thing altogether.
Great job, we won! Yay!
Now, of course, it does try to go and encourage you to go and like really win big in these tournaments, and even telling you to go and get 30 points in order to play, in order to get a big piece, in order to unlock one of the tracks. And I'll say right now, in order to go and get 30 points, yeah, you have to go and be really good at it in order to go and like win every single track in that tournament and stuff like that. Like, it does encourage you to go and like be a big winner in this case, but still though, to generally win, it doesn't necessarily require you to go and be in first place into every track, or like you don't even have to be in first place in any of them, and you'll still end up winning the whole tournament. But of course, since we are talking about a Muppet racing game, it is worth mentioning about the characters in here, specifically on who you could go and play. And I will give credit to this. They have a wide array of characters that you can go and actually play in this. And already at the beginning, you can select from 8 different characters, but in total, if you're able to go and unlock them all, there are 25 different characters that you can go and play. And it's not just like the standard popular ones from the Muppet Show, like Kermit, Fozzie, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Animal, and more. But there are also plenty of other ones that they would go include, like all the others from the Electric Mayhem. You get Link Hogthrob. In fact, actually, since I do have this right here, like I can look in the back and like I could just see like many of the others. Like you do have like Scooter. You also do have several of the ones that are more notable, like later on in like Muppets Tonight. Like you got Pepe, you got Johnny Fiamma, you got Clifford, you got Bean Bunny, you got Bobo, and who is possibly the most interesting one here is actually a Doozer. Yes, I'm talking about a Doozer from Fraggle Rock. And there is one thing related to the Doozers that is also a big part in this game that I will go and get to later. But yes, you do get all these characters, and each one of them have their own unique vehicles. And by the way, before I get into that, I might as well go and mention about the graphics. And I will say that for a PS1 game, it is fine. I mean, yes, it is very blocky, and they were very limited to what they can do with the technology at the time. And yeah, there might be some characters that don't necessarily translate well onto the PS1 graphics, like Pepe, for example, kind of looks a little bit like a mess. But still, though, I will say that it is fine. Like, it's the kind that, at the very least, it does get the job done. But still, though, since it is the Muppets, one thing that does make the game stand out and really add that Muppet charm is related to the humor. And a big part of that is with the voice acting, in which the original people at the time, they did return to go and play their respective characters. In fact, one thing that is worth mentioning, one thing that makes Muppet RaceMania very significant in Muppet history, is that this is one of the final times that you get to hear Frank Oz play many of his original characters, like Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Animal, Sam the Eagle. So this is one of the last times that you do get that Frank Oz greatness where he would play his characters.
See, I told you it went. Lost? No, there must be some mistake. Animal, greetings. I am Sam the Eagle.
And this is not to mention that many of the quips that they would go and do, of course, like, it adds that Muppet personality. It adds that Muppet style humor with not just their charm, but also with their wit as well. And of course, like the most that you would get in terms of dialogue or whoever would go and talk, it is easily Statler and Waldorf, because they're always there no matter what to go and make a comment on whichever track that you're in, or if you would go and actually win the race or something like that. They're always going to go and step in, and they will go and make their usual critical comments during the whole thing. And there's a lot of them that are a lot of fun, a lot of fourth wall breaking, and do add in like a great amount of humor that does make this recognizably a Muppet game.
If it were up to me, I wouldn't let him drive in the bedroom.
If it were up to me, I wouldn't let them drive at all.
And also, since I am talking about like what you would go and get to hear, I also want to take a moment to go and talk about the music, because one thing that stands out with this Muppet game in particular is that it has its own collection of music that are each individually different with each track that you would go and get into. And honestly, I do have a little bit of mixed feelings about the music in particular, because on one hand, it is a little bit disappointing that since they are going into tracks that are based on the individual Muppet movies, I kind of wish that they would go and use songs from those respective movies in order to go and race around, you know, like have like this fun racing style version of the familiar songs in these in the movies, like have some kind of like racing version of Rainbow Connection or Hey a Movie or It Feels Like Christmas and stuff like that. But then again, I do understand because like there is a lot of like complications in terms of copyright that I'm sure they weren't able to go and get everything, especially with some of the later movies. Like they would have to go and ask Disney in order to get like some of the rights for the music of like Muppets Christmas Carol or Muppet Treasure Island, or like with Sony, in which they would use a lot of like familiar pop songs that they would go and use. Like it would have added a very nice touch and really make it distinct to stand out that you're racing in those movies in particular. But then again, I will say that doesn't necessarily mean that the music that they do have here is bad. That is the plus side of the music, is that they each are individually good. They are each individually fun to listen to. And I'll even admit that I have used the music for some of my videos. In fact, there is actually one track in particular that if you've been watching my videos long enough, you might find that it's actually familiar. And it is specifically the one in New York City. So just take a listen and tell me if you find that familiar. Yes, that is indeed the track that I use for the credits of my videos. And I mean, considering that it is from a game like Muppet RaceMania, I mean, a big part of it, I'll admit, is mainly because, well, the music of Muppet RaceMania doesn't get tracked onto YouTube's copyright system, so I am free to go and use it. And I know I'm not the only one who would go and use the soundtrack of Muppet RaceMania for my videos. I know Kid Icarus would go and use it from time to time for his as well, along with recycling a lot of the soundtrack of the Rugrats PS1 game. But this is just to go and mention how I definitely do enjoy the soundtrack, at least enough to go and use it for my videos, even though it would have been nice to hear like some of the songs like Cabin Fever or Happiness Hotel and stuff like that. The songs that they do have here, it is solid enough, and they do capture a bit of that Muppet-like spirit. But anyways, to get myself back on track here, no pun intended, by the way, I do want to talk about the vehicles, because when I was playing this game for this review, I was surprised to discover that they each have their own stats, that depending on which cart that you're racing in, they each have their own different way of controlling, and some can feel a little bit more different than others. There are some that can quickly turn, there are some that are much faster, some that are easier to go and brake. Now, I know that some people will go and tell me that, well, duh, that's pretty much the standard to have in racing games. And I don't just mean like with the Mario Kart clones, but just in racing games in general. Yeah, they would each have their own stat. But the reason why I am surprised to go and discover this is mainly because they don't directly tell you. Like when you would go and select your character and select your cart, they don't immediately say which ones have different stats and stuff like that, because oddly enough, they actually kind of hide that, or not necessarily hide it, but you have to go and like go into like these different layers in order to go and access where to know what the stats of each cart may be. And the only way that you could go and find out is in the Meet the Muppets section. And to actually figure out what those stats are, you would have to go and unlock each of the characters to be familiar with their carts. So you would have to go into the Meet the Muppets section, you have to select a character, and then from there, you would go and discover what their stats are. And that's honestly a criticism that I do have, is that not just with the stats, but there are some things that I feel like you would have to go like in different menus first in order to go and have access them. I feel like this is something that it should be easier to go and access, or something that they should be more direct to go and tell you. Like, this is something that I feel like they should tell you when you're selecting your character and selecting your cart. That's where they should go and mention what are the different stats of each cart that you're in, not like have it hidden in there, because like in order to go and be very familiar with the carts that you have, it requires a lot of experimenting and a lot of testing. If you don't go and do that, then the rest is just going to be a bit of a guessing game. And when I was playing this, I actually find myself a bit surprised, and I was pretty curious to find like, oh, this is weird. Like some of the cards feel more different than others. Like for the longest time, I was thinking that maybe they're all the same. You know, it's a little bit like with some of the games, like with Mario Kart, where if they don't tell you what the stats are, it means that the stats don't necessarily matter. Just pick your character and then just go into the races. But in this case here, they did put in the effort to make the carts different. I just wish that they would have been a little bit more upfront about what their stats are, especially if you're going to go into the race, so that you would know, you would be more ready, like on the spot, to whenever you're going to go into either a tournament or into a specific track. And by the way, speaking of the vehicles, there is something interesting in which you can go and actually unlock them depending on the character you play. And this is where the special moves come in. Because with the special moves where you could screw over your opponents during the race, it's not just to go and get you way ahead in order to go and like get to the lead, but it's also, depending on who you play, you can go and actually unlock the carts of the characters that you have screwed over. Like, for example, let's say I play as Fozzie and I'm in a race and I activate my special move. Now, depending on who the character is that I've screwed over, I just unlock their carts so that now I can play as Fozzie and I could choose to go in their cart as well. So there's a lot of mixing and matching that you can actually go and do. So you can imagine that there's so many different possibilities with the 25 characters and the 25 different carts that you can go and pick. So you could go and play as your favorite Muppet, and you could choose whichever cart that you feel the most comfortable with. But there is a massive catch with this. And if you are trying to go and unlock everything, there is a massive component in which it is based on luck. Because the thing is that you have to go and when you're on a race, you don't get to choose who are your opponents. It's basically the game itself randomizing which opponent that you can go and get. So from there, if you would play like with Kermit, for example, and if you want to get a cart that is from Bean Bunny, like if you want to race on Bean Bunny's cart and play as Kermit, then you would have to go into a race and hope that maybe the computer will have Bean Bunny as your opponent, and then you would have to go and do the action in order to go and collect all the veggies and fruit, fill up your beaker, and then activate your special move. And also, when you do this, it's not like, oh, you can go and unlock the card for any character to go and get in. No, it's specifically on the character that you activate the special move that they are able to go and unlock it. Like, to go back on my Fozzie Bear example, like if I play as Fozzie Bear and I screwed over Dr. Teeth, for example, with my special move, and I got to unlock his cart, I don't get to unlock Dr. Teeth's cart for everyone. I only unlocked it for Fozzie Bear. So not only is there an element of luck, but there would be this element of grinding that you would have to keep on doing again and again with each character that you would go and have. And with each race that you would get into with the randomized characters, and hopefully that you can go that maybe you're able to go and collect all the fruits in order to go and activate your special move. So from there, you can imagine that there might be a bit of an aspect that might get repetitive in terms of the continuous grinding, just so you can have all the characters race in whichever cart they can go and have. But speaking of unlocking, by the way, there is so much that you can go and unlock in this game. And I'm not just talking about exclusively the characters and the vehicles, but there are so many different modes that you can also go and unlock. And a big part of trying to unlock everything is going into what is called the adventure mode. And this is a little bit different than some of the adventure modes that you would go and find in like Crash Team Racing or Walt Disney World Racing, for example, because these adventure modes are specifically for each of the unique tracks that they have in the game. And I will say, honestly, these are actually very clever mechanics because they're not just to go and unlock stuff, but they also help the player to go and get familiar with the tracks, to go and encourage them to go and get into all the different shortcuts onto the secret paths, for them to go and be more familiar, to go and find the easiest route in order to go and like win the race much faster and to go and beat the opponents. And at the same time, in terms of the unlocking aspect, what you would have to go and do is just collect everything that is in the tracks, that you would have to go and collect all the fruits, all the stars that you would go and pick up in order to go and get your items, to collect the tokens that represents the track that is in there, to go and collect a movie clip. And by the way, that is also another aspect of Muppet RaceMania. Before you go and enter into a track, they would go and present you a clip from the movie that it is based on. So before you get into a track of the Muppet movie, for example, you get to see a clip from the Muppet movie. And there is a way in adventure mode that if you collect like, you can actually collect that movie clip so that you can watch it whenever you want. And from there, you can actually unlock different modes that you can play on those respective tracks. That you can go and unlock a reverse mode in which you can race around the track backwards. There are also battle modes, which I will get into later because honestly, I'm excited to go and talk about that. So basically, in each of the tracks, they do have an adventure mode where you can go and collect, and you can have so many different ways that you can actually go and play on those respective tracks. But at the same time, however, there are different things that you can unlock in those adventure modes, which includes unlocking a character or even something called a doozer rescue. And with the characters, this is actually a little bit more tricky because there are times when they would go and actually hide the characters in like a secret location. And by the way, that's one thing I do want to add with these tracks. They're not just built for the racing, but there's also some elements that are built especially for the adventure mode that is meant to have like secret rooms that they give you little obstacle courses in order to go and collect more of the things like the movie clips, the stars, the fruit, and the tokens and stuff like that. But also, there are times when they would go and hide characters. And when you do find the character, that's when you have to go and race them in order to go and actually unlock them. But then at the same time, there is also another thing that you can do in each of the tracks, and that is called the doozer rescue, where in each track in adventure mode, there is a doozer that is lost in the track. And what you have to do is move that doozer where you have to bring them to a warp in order to go and rescue them. And honestly, out of all the things in the adventure mode, this one honestly is the trickiest. Both the characters and the doozer rescues, they can be extremely tricky, and there are some that admittedly, they can be frustrating because depending on the tracks, there are some that can be a little bit more straightforward and they can be easy to do in terms of either finding the character or just bringing the doozer onto the warp in order to go and rescue them. But there are others, however, that they would go and make massive obstacle courses out of, and they would kind of turn this into a platformer. And I'll just say, the platforming aspect of Muppet RaceMania, it's great on paper, but in execution, oh my goodness, it's honestly bad. I would honestly say it's probably the worst thing about Muppet RaceMania is when it wants to try to be a platformer. And the biggest reason is because of the controls. They're not meant for platforming. They are meant for racing. And there are times when they can be extremely slippery. They can be a little bit difficult to try to go and control. There are some that it would take a little bit of time to like just get used to it. And there are those that, you know, they are easy to go and maneuver. But I can guarantee you that most of the carts in this game, they are not made for platforming, and they can make this feel extremely difficult to do. Like, there are some that, like, honestly, it feels next to impossible with what they are trying to go and ask you to do. Especially like with the doozer one, for example, like they're asking you to keep on nudging that doozer onto wherever they ask you to go. And there are times when they ask you to go and like jump through hoops and go through these random obstacles that ask you to just jump around and like do all these different platforms in order to go onto the other side. And it can honestly be absolutely ridiculous. It's like honestly insane that they're asking me to try to do that with the controls that they are giving me that is meant a lot more for, or that is meant more for racing than to do stuff like this. Again, it's great in theory, but in practice, it's honestly next to impossible, or sometimes it could be next to impossible. And this also goes for like the characters as well. There are times when they make you go through insane obstacles and make you do like these crazy platforms that you have to keep on wrestling the controls. And not to mention, by the way, no, you cannot control the camera whatsoever in order to make sure that your next move is precisely correct. So from there, you're pretty much like struggling again and again just to go and either get the doozer to the warp or to try to go and get a specific character. Oh, and did I forget to mention that there's also a time limit with adventure mode? Like, you don't have time to go and do everything whenever you want. It only gives you like 3 to 4 minutes to go and try to do one of the tasks, rather it be collect all the fruits and vegetables or collect all the stars or try to get the hidden character that is on the track. Like, they ask you to do it one at a time, but sometimes like even doing one of these tasks, especially with the doozer rescue or trying to find the hidden character, like honestly, it's just ridiculous. And it's like something that you desperately need more time on. So that is why it is really worth mentioning that trying to complete the game, trying to do everything it asks in order to 100% it is a lot more different than just simply playing the game. You could go and actually play it casually, and that's fine. You can do your own thing. But if you're going to go and try to complete it, there are times when it could be asking you to do a lot. And there are times when the things that they could be asking you feels next to impossible because the controls put you at a massive disadvantage. So there are times when the things that they're asking you can be a little bit too ridiculous. even by Muppet standards, that it can get out of hand. So depending on your experience on how you want to play Muppet RaceMania, I think there is a stronger chance that you'll be enjoying it a lot more if you just want to play it straightforward and play it casually and just do the racing and some of the other modes that it may offer, than to try to go and literally unlock everything. Like, doing that whole thing, there are going to be some times where it can really be frustrating. It can really be anger-inducing, especially with how the controls just basically give you a massive disadvantage where they're asking you to do things that it's not meant to do. And speaking of modes, by the way, it is worth mentioning that you don't just race in Muppet RaceMania. There are other ways that you can actually play the game. And one of these, I might as well get this out of the way, is regarding stunts. And stunts is basically a literal obstacle course where you have to go from point A to point B, where you have to go and jump on different platforms. You got to go on these different obstacles in order to go and make it to that finish line. It's not a race. It's only you that's there, but you got to go into this crazy obstacle course. And basically, it is the platforming levels of Muppet RaceMania. And since I've just put out a massive rant about the controls and how it is not meant to be a platformer, the stunts are easily the worst aspect of Muppet RaceMania. They're not really that fun. And sometimes the things that they're asking you to do, like, they can feel next to impossible because of the controls that you have, and how most of the carts, they just feel way too slippery in order to go and actually accomplish that. And even if they give you a time limit of, I think of like, it might be like 10 minutes, sometimes it is just not enough because there's just a lot of trial and error that you would have to go and do because of the controls, or because the cart you might have chosen because you didn't know might be a little bit too slippery. So if there's one thing I wouldn't recommend to go and try out in Muppet RaceMania, it would be the stunts. Like, even if there's also like the adventure mode where you have to collect everything in there, it's just, I don't feel like it is worth it. But then, to go onto the flip side of it, there is another mode in this that I would debatably say it's the best one of Muppet RaceMania. In fact, I think I have more fun playing this mode than I do with the actual races, and that is the battle mode. And the battle mode is very much like you would find in some of the other games, where what you have to do is try to beat your opponents. They each have a health bar, and you got to make sure that all their health bars go to 0, rather it be by crashing them or using items to go and take them down in order to be the last one standing. And I say this is probably my favorite mode in this because it really does take advantage of the Muppet aspect, and some of the flaws of the game are not as problematic as they would be in some of the other modes like in racing, because this is where chaos is the top priority. This is where the Muppet style madness really is emphasized here, where you would just go race around and you would just beat each other up in order to be the last one surviving in this. And there are times when it can really get chaotic to the point where you never know if there's going to be one that is doing fine, and then suddenly everybody is just crashing on them, everybody is throwing items on them, and then suddenly, boom, they're done. They are out of the game. Like, there are times, like, it can even happen to you where suddenly you think you're doing good, and then suddenly everybody is just ganging up on you, and like, you could just go and immediately like lose in the moment right there, in just a matter of a few seconds if you do end up in the wrong spot. But then again, like, it might sound frustrating, but that's all just part of the whole battle game right there. And on top of the fact that this is the mode that I personally find that the controls are not as much of an issue. Even if it can be like super slippery, that's not necessarily the main point. You know, it's not about trying to go from point A to point B. It's not about trying to be in first place or anything like that. The controls don't necessarily matter. So it doesn't matter on how slippery things can be with the card that you have selected. Like, it's all about the chaos. In fact, it could actually be part of the chaos as well, where things are just going crazy, your card is going crazy, so it just adds into everything when you want to try to go and take down your opponent. And yes, by the way, there is an adventure mode in this as well that has the same functions, in which you have to go and collect a bunch of stuff. But what you do unlock in the battle adventures, they are a little bit more different. What you get, depending on the stage that you're in, you can go and get a chicken chase mode, in which it's a 2-player game. And then what is very interesting is that you also get to unlock boss battles, in which in each of the tracks, or in each of the battle tracks, they actually do have an individual boss that you would have to go and take down. And these are not like the racers that you could go and unlock. Like, these are like exclusive bosses in that mode. Like, there's Sweetums, there's Beauregard, there's Bill, Gil, and Jill. There's Statler and Waldorf. There's Spot Am, and there is Dr. Van Neuter. And you would have to go and try to beat them. And there are a few that I will say they can be pretty difficult, because generally it is one-on-one against the boss. But then there are some, like Statler and Waldorf is 2v1, or especially, like, probably the hardest one is Bill, Gil, and Jill, in which is 3v1. So yeah, those ones can get absolutely intense. But what's really cool about them is that once you do beat the boss, you unlock another mode in which you could go and you can battle on that stage, but you could play as the boss. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to go and actually unlock those bosses. Like, you can't use the boss, like, you cannot play as either Beauregard or Sweetums, like to go and race around and stuff like that. But it is cool that they do actually give you that option. So it is actually a fun reward to go and actually beat those bosses. Now, with that said, though, I understand that if you're going to go and try to complete the game 100%, I understand that it can be frustrating, especially with what I've mentioned with trying to unlock all the characters, or trying to rescue all the doozers in all the different adventure modes. I understand how it can be pretty frustrating. However, there is a way around it. You don't necessarily have to go and try to unlock everything the traditional way. Because in the game, of course, as it is a PS1 game, there are some cheat codes that you can go and activate, where on the main menu, before you hit start, you can press a set of buttons, and then it can actually let you go and unlock certain things. Like, and the thing is that with this game, it's actually pretty open about it. In fact, since I do have the original game here, the funny thing is that on the last page, there is actually one where you can actually use the cheat codes. It pretty much tells you directly on which cheat codes that you can do, and it would let you go and unlock specific things. So there are basically cheat codes that lets you unlock specific things that are in the game. You can unlock all the characters, all the vehicles. You can unlock individual secret tracks that would require you to go and collect like specific things. Like if you gather all the food in the adventure mode or all the stars, then there are certain tracks that you can actually go and unlock, or depending on how many times that you play the tournament mode and stuff like that. And by the way, there is one thing that is actually really cool that you can go and unlock. There is a cheat code for this, but if you go and free all the doozers in all the adventure modes, then you can unlock a Fraggle Rock track. And there's even a cheat code in which at the end credits, you can get access to 6 different courses that are either like individual tracks, or they could be like battle modes. And from there, you could do like a top view of specific tracks, or just like generic tracks, but like you could see it like in a top view, so that you could play the game in a completely different way. So there are those things that you can do that if you just want to go and pick up and play, and you want to have everything ready, and you know, you just want to play it for fun, or like you want to bring in a friend, and like you want to have those like 2-player games that you want to play and enjoy, then you could just go and activate the cheat codes, and you could immediately have that ready by your side. And if you want to go and try to do it more the fair way, there is even a code in which you can go and actually reset everything. That basically Muppet RaceMania does have its own factory reset mode in a way. But at the same time, however, there is one thing that it doesn't have a cheat code that you have to go and take the proper steps in order to go and unlock. And I've seen different websites say that there are different ways that you would have to go and unlock it. And I'll just admit right now, I'll be transparent, I haven't taken the time to actually go and do so, because honestly, that task would take me forever in order to go and get that. But some have said that if you would go and win on all the tracks, or if you would go and complete everything on the adventure mode, on all the tracks, the battle modes, and the stunts, and some say that if you go and like get the high scores, like get like over 30 points or over 20 points, depending like on all the tournaments for the racing ones and the battle one, then you would go and unlock a secret track called Disco. And it's this very psychedelic track with like a wide array of colors that you could go and race in. It's like a very trippy track. But it's basically your big reward, depending on like the big task that you would have to go and do, so that if you would go and actually do like whatever it may be, whether it be like completing all the courses, or finishing them all in adventure mode, or like winning all the tournaments, like whatever you have to do, there is that one thing that you have to go and do it, because there is no cheat code in order to go and unlock that. So I think overall, like if you're not willing to do the traditional way of completing the game 100%, but you do want to get the disco mode, I think that would be like the ultimate prize to go and get in Muppet RaceMania. So overall, when it comes to Muppet RaceMania, after all these years, now coming back to go and play it and trying all the different modes it has to offer, I gotta say, I actually had a good time with it. I actually enjoyed my time playing with Muppet RaceMania. Now, one thing I will go and admit, sure, maybe it's not the best Mario Kart clone type game out there. And sure, maybe it's not the best racing game that you would find on the PlayStation 1. I mean, it definitely is no Crash Team Racing. And that is especially with the fact that there are some things that either you would have to take a lot of time to get used to, or there are some things that it asks you that it honestly feels pretty impossible. Like, for example, example, with the controls, it takes a lot of time to go and really experiment with each of the carts and finding a specific one that you're the most comfortable with, especially if you have to go and unlock everything. And then there's also the factor that there are some things that it would go and ask you, especially with the platforming, that it could feel next to impossible. So yeah, the controls, they can be very iffy. The platforms, honestly, they feel great on paper, but not good in execution. But the rest, however, I feel like it definitely is a lot of fun. As a Muppet game, it stays true to the franchise's charm. It has the great humor, and especially hearing the great voice acting, especially to hear Frank Oz for the final time to play as Fozzie Bear and Miss Piggy and all those other characters. Like, it definitely does feel like a Muppet game, like, especially with the charm, and not to mention the chaos of it all, especially with the battle mode. Like, things can get crazy, but it's the kind of crazy that you would go and expect from a Muppet game. And not to mention, just as a Mario Kart style game, it also is a lot of fun, while at the same time providing a lot of elements that do make it unique, especially with not just with the tracks, but especially with the battle mode as well. In fact, I'll even say that I often find myself getting very engaged with what they would have to offer. There are times when I really got myself invested with playing Muppet RaceMania, rather it be with the tracks, trying to be more determined to go and get into first place, or even with the battle modes, especially like honestly, I found myself really invested when fighting against the bosses, or just like going into the battle tournaments and stuff like that. Like, those are honestly a lot of fun, and like I get myself really invested in this. So honestly, and not to mention, I do admire the customization, like how it really does get into a lot of the Muppets, not just with the classic Muppet Show ones, but even with some of the recent ones at the time, like from Muppets Tonight. So from there, you get to see like a lot of customization, especially with the 25 different characters and the 25 different tracks. Honestly, I definitely had a great time, not just as a Muppet fan, but also as a gamer. And this is why I may do a hot take in this. I don't know if this is like a great debate amongst the Muppet community, but I gotta say that Muppet RaceMania might actually be the best Muppet game out there. Like, I know there isn't many Muppet games that are available, and I know that a lot of them are not great in the first place, but honestly, I feel like this might be the one that could be like the best of the best out there. Like, the only one that I could really think of that might match up to it is maybe Muppet CD-ROM, but even at that, that's like a CD-ROM game. But at least in terms of like home console games, I would say that maybe Muppet RaceMania would be number one. It might be the best of them all so far. And I know it, like, again, it's not necessarily like a major achievement to try to go and get. And I know technically this isn't necessarily one of the best games out there. It's no masterpiece whatsoever, but still by the Muppet standards, Traveler's Tales really went up and beyond with this one to make it a unique cartoony style racing game out there. And that's why for my recommendation, I know this might sound like a niche group amongst a niche group, but if you are a Muppet fan who so happens to also have a PS1, then I think you should have this as part of your collection. I think this would be the perfect game for Muppet fans who still have their PS1s. It's definitely a lot of fun. And even if you're not a Muppet fan and you still have a PS1, I definitely recommend that you go and pick this up and try it out. I mean, keep in mind, I probably said this before, but this is no Crash Team Racing whatsoever, but this is still a fun alternative if you want something different from the Mario Karts and the Crash Team Racings. This is actually a pretty enjoyable one to go and pick up and play. Especially like, again, you don't necessarily have to go and collect everything. You could go and put up the cheats to go and unlock almost all the stuff, and you could just go from there and just have a blast with it. And that is why, with my rating, it might be a little bit of a complex one, and I did think about it, but I will say, as a Muppet fan and as a gamer, I would give Muppet RaceMania an 8 out of 10. Now, I know that is a pretty high score, and I will say, though, if you are not a Muppet fan, if you don't really care about the Muppets, there is a good chance you might go and rate it a little bit lower, and you might give it like a 7 out of 10, and maybe there are some that I wouldn't be surprised would go and say maybe a 6 out of 10 even. But for me personally, I have a great time with it, and the more I do play it, the more I find myself really getting engaged with it and really enjoying the Muppet factor into this. So that's why for me, I would go and give this an 8. Again, I think this is so far the best Muppet video game out there. And honestly, it deserves to get a second look. I think this is a game that I feel like people should rediscover this, and that hopefully in the future, if there is ever going to be another Muppet game, hopefully it will match up or even exceed the standards of Muppet RaceMania. And that should do it for this review of Muppet RaceMania. And I gotta say, for a Muppet game, this review turned out to be a lot longer than I expected. But then again, some could say that maybe it's a good thing for the game, considering that there's just so much to go and discuss here. And before I go and I sign out, I would like to go and give out a huge thanks to Shockwave FPS Studios for their amazing support on Patreon, which got them this review of Muppet RaceMania and why I've been talking about a video game. So, I would just like to go and also add that if you would like to be like Shockwave FPS and you want to go and get some amazing rewards, but not limited to seeing my videos before anyone else, uncut and unedited with no ad breaks in it whatsoever, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you guys enjoyed this review, then don't forget to go to give this review a like and to go and subscribe to my YouTube channel with much more Muppet madness and especially a lot more cartoon madness, since I primarily do talk about animation. So yeah, I know this review is a little bit more different, just talking about a Muppet video game, but I mean, this is still part of like my passions and my interests, so I'm more than happy to go and talk about it. And with that said and done, I would like to say thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes.
You're a real winner.
You're being awfully nice.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant whiner.
Oh!